Hi there, my name is Grant McCarty. I'm a local foods and small farms educator with the University of Illinois Extension, serving Daviess-Stephenson and Winnebago counties. This week on Get Growing, we're talking about soil testing, one of the main actions that you can take at the end of your growing season. We'll talk about some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to getting soil from the backyard to then be sent to that soil testing lab. And we'll also talk about some of the other things you might need to consider when it comes to collecting a good sample to get the right results that you need for the upcoming growing season. At the University of Illinois Extension, we recommend getting a soil test in the fall. The reason for this is that it can take a couple months to raise or lower that soil pH, and you may find through a soil test that you have to do that. If you get the soil test in the spring, you may not have enough time to modify that soil pH before planting. Another thing that we recommend is to get a soil test maybe every 3 to 5 years. You may find that if you got a soil test every single year, that you're not going to get the same results or really see much changes. When it comes to soil sampling in your growing area, you don't need a lot of equipment. You need a good, strong shovel that can get to about 6 inches in depth, and then you need a bucket to really collect the soil that you're going to be getting. That's really it. Another thing to mention is that when it comes to actually collecting the soil, you're taking samples from around that growing area. So you can see I've got a flag here that would be a place where I would start to collect the soil. I have another flag that's about 5-6 feet away. And then throughout this growing area of my lawn, I also have places where I'm collecting the soil. It's all going into this one bucket that you see here. And from there, I'm submitting about a half a cup to 1 cup of soil to that soil testing lab. The reason to do this is that it's giving you a much greater understanding and representation of this growing area compared to if you just sampled from one flag and submitted that. You'll also note that I grew a lot of vegetables this summer in raised beds, and those really need to be 2 separate samples because mixing the soil from the raised beds with this lawn area is not going to give me really good accurate information when it comes to understanding what my soil is and what some of the opportunities are as well as the challenges are when it comes to getting my soil on its right path. So here we have some soil that was collected at one of our demonstration gardens in Stephenson County. The last time we had a soil test on this was in 2014. Every year we've grown vegetables there, so we are just kind of curious at this stage as to what might be going on in our soil. Now that we have all these samples in this big bucket, we need to then create that subsample. As you look towards kind of creating that subsample, you're going to find that you need to break up some clods in there. You may also find that there is plant debris that needs to be removed. You don't want to include that in the subsample. And then you want to make sure that it's pretty dry. So you may find that if it's pretty wet, you may need to lay out that soil for a couple of days before sitting in that subsample. Once you feel pretty comfortable with this, give it a good mix, and from this bucket, we're really just going to submit about half a cup to maybe a little bit less than a cup of soil to our soil testing lab. When I reach out to a soil testing lab, they're going to send a kit, and the kits will include these sample bags, and usually they're going to make a mark as to how much soil they need. So for our kit here, I'm just going to right about here where my finger is, which is a little bit more than maybe half a cup of soil is going to be going to the soil testing lab. One of the questions that we sometimes get at the University of Illinois Extension office is, could I soil sample from my raised beds? And you certainly could. Just think about how you might be soil sampling from a lawn or another area where you're growing in the soil and adapt that to your raised beds. I have 3 raised beds I am growing in this season, so I would want to take soil samples from all 3 of them. And I would also yet again want to take representation from different parts of those raised beds in order to then submit that subsample to the soil testing lab. When you connect with a soil testing lab and you receive a soil testing kit, typically you're going to have a document in there where you will fill out to tell the soil testing lab what you're planning to grow with the soil that you've submitted. And so this document can allow you to then get better recommendations from that soil testing lab. The soil testing lab would then be able to say that the pH on the soil should work great for the vegetables that you're growing, or they may find that the soil pH needs to be modified. It will allow the lab to say that the phosphorus, potassium levels of that soil are adequate for the vegetables or other crops you're planning to grow. And it can also give you better fertilizer recommendations too, because the soil testing lab knows what you're planning to grow. At the University of Illinois Extension, we also recommend getting a soil test before you plant a perennial plant, such as the peach tree that you see here. The reason for that is once you already have planted that perennial plant, it can be very hard to modify that soil pH. Whereas if you get that soil test performed before you planted and you realize you had to modify the soil, you would have enough time to do that. So that's this week on Get Growing. A soil test is one of the great things that you can do to really shut down this year's summer vegetable garden and begin to think about what next year's summer vegetable garden looks like. If you haven't taken a soil test in the last 3 to 5 years, this might be a great time to do such. If you are growing in a new area that you've never grown in before, definitely think about getting a soil test for that area. The University of Illinois Extension does not endorse a particular soil testing lab over another, and we maintain a website with the contact information of soil testing labs in the Midwest. You will find a link to that website connected to today's video. For more information on resources and upcoming events, please visit extension.illinois.edu/JSW or follow us on Facebook at Northwest Illinois Local Foods.